Welcome everyone to Self Principle. As always, I'm Dr. Sean Hashmi. Now today's topic is all about olive oil and whether or not you should start to try and include it in your diet. There's an interesting observational study that included over 90,000 healthcare professionals. And what they were looking for was comparing just over half a tablespoon of olive oil per day versus essentially less than that. And what they found was that even that little tiny dose of olive oil, just half a tablespoon or more per day, had a 19% lower risk of mortality. Now, this study had a 28-year follow-up, so it's a really long time. In addition, what they showed was that higher intakes of olive oil were linked to a 19% lower risk of cardiovascular disease mortality, which means things like heart disease and so forth, 17% lower risk of cancer death, 29% lower risk of neurodegenerative diseases like dementia, Alzheimer's, and so forth, and 18% lower risk of dying from respiratory diseases. So far, it seems like there's a lot of good stuff in this study talking about olive oil. Let's see some of the finer details. So the first thing was, when they showed was that if you replace 10 grams per day of margarine, butter, mayonnaise, or dairy fat with the same amount coming from olive oil, you actually saw about an 8 to 34% reduction in both total mortality, risk of dying from all causes, and cause-specific, meaning specific disease mortality going on. But what was interesting was that when they looked at substituting olive oil for other vegetable oils, they actually saw no change in mortality going on. So in other words, vegetable oils and olive oil had similar outcomes going on. So let's go back to our question, should you be including olive oil in your diet? Well, from this study, what's interesting is, and a little bit concerning to me, is how they could see so much benefit with just half a tablespoon of olive oil per day. That seems like there might be a confounding variable or so forth going on. The other thing is, this is a correlation. Just like when we talk about other population-based studies, correlation does not necessarily mean A is causing B. Now, the population in this study, 99% were white. They were healthier than the US population. Their BMI was close to the normal range. They were just at the upper limit of it at 25.3 to 25.8. Remember, normal ends at 25. And they ate substantially more fruits and vegetables than the average person. They were getting about 4.8 to 7.2 fruits and vegetables per day. What was really interesting, though, was that the arm that had the highest olive oil consumption tended to be more physically active. They ate a healthier diet compared to the people getting less olive oil, and they were less likely to smoke. Those are huge confounders that you have to think about, because those themselves could actually explain a lot of stuff about heart disease, brain disease, respiratory illnesses, and so forth. So really, if you're looking at this study, what can you take away and what should you ought to do? So the first thing is if you want to use olive oil instead of things like saturated fat, animal fat such as butter, margarine, or dairy, that's a great idea. Olive oil would be a good piece in there. But the question that I would raise is, what about olive oil versus no oil? So in other words, if you have two groups following a whole food plant-based diet, one is using oils and the other isn't, the question becomes would no oil be even better than using some kind of oil? And remember, at least in this study, there wasn't a difference between olive oil and other things. So all of the vegetables oils and olive oil were the same. At the end of the day, if you're going to use some olive oil, that's great. It's not a problem. And if you want to look at it from an overall health perspective, just think about your basics. Lots of whole grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes. Those are your staples and your foundation where you want to build everything around. As always, I want to thank you so much for checking us out. Video idea, or you have a topic that you'd like me to cover on the next video, just shoot me an email at selfprinciple@gmail.com. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.